I'm a little behind, but let's talk about everything I read in September. I read 11 books this month. That's 3 physical books, 8 audiobooks. First audiobook I finished was Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. I love John Green. I've never read a John Green book. I've never read John Green fiction, even though I have one sitting on my shelf. But I grew up with Crash Course. I love Crash Course. I love John Green, Hank Green. Follow them on Instagram. Follow them on TikTok. Like, John and Hank Green are my Bill Nye the Science Guy. And this was such an interesting and necessary perspective for Westerners who don't understand the effect that tuberculosis has had on the world and is still having, but we don't see it because here, because of money, we have escaped the consequences. This was an incredibly sad book, an incredibly informative book. I give it 5 stars. First physical book I read was Don't Cry For Me by Daniel Black. I've made a separate video on this. You will hear from me. This is heartbreaking. This was a book club book. This is my first Daniel Black book I've ever read, and a recommendation from Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I really enjoy. I gave it 4.75 stars. If you look like me and you grew up with similar privilege to me and you want different perspectives and you're trying to read books that widen your worldview, this is a great one and you will cry. Next book I finished was Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is the second book in the Empyrean series. I gave this one 4 stars. I definitely enjoyed the first one more, but I think just because the ride of it was more succinct. But I did love this book. Jaw-dropping cliffhanger. I will be starting the next one in October, and I'm just like, where are we going? My next audiobook was The Assassin's Blade, which is I'm not going to tell you where to put it in your reading journey. For me, first time I read this book, it was my 3rd. Now I am listening on audiobook and I started with it. There are arguments for both. I'm not going to make them here. Anyway, this is by Sarah J. Maas. It's a part of the Throne of Glass series. I think I enjoyed the listening experience of this one more. I didn't love it when I first read it. I love the series, but out of the series, this was definitely my least favorite book in it. And it being a novella with the other ones being novels, that's not an uncommon experience. But this being my first reread/listen of Throne of Glass, I picked up on so many important details that made me appreciate this book so much more. Like, Sarah J. Maas is an expert in Easter egging. First time I read this, I gave it 3.75 stars, and I did feel like I was being generous at the time, but upon rereading it and having the context of the entire series, I'm gonna bump that up to 4 stars. My next audiobook was Searching for Sunday by Rachel Held Evans. I had never read a book by Rachel Held Evans, but as an individual, I really enjoy the presence that she had while she was still here. She has since passed and left a legacy of trying to help people who are in their deconstruction journey do so with love and grace for themselves and others. I really liked this book. As someone who still identifies with the religion that they were raised with, despite the fact that I have let go of so many parts of it, this felt like a warm hug of someone saying, I see you. My next physical book was White River Red by Becky Marietta. This was a nice, easy novel with a few complex layers. It was a bit historical, a circus aspect, a carnival aspect, a complicated female main character who you can root for. It wasn't my normal read. I'm happy I read this. I gave it 4.25 stars. My next audiobook, this was a really short one. It was Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions by Gloria Steinem. I think this is my 2nd or 3rd Gloria Steinem book. Every book that I've done by her, I've done on audiobook. I typically try to do more nonfiction on audiobook because I struggle to really hold focus and engage with a physical book through nonfiction. But as audiobook, I find it so much easier. And then I would flip-flop that with fiction. If I'm doing fiction as an audiobook, I struggle to engage unless I have previously read it physically. I gave this 4 stars. As a feminist, I think it's really important to understand the past of feminism. And I feel like Gloria Steinem does a really good job of contextualizing that. My next audiobook was On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. I read this one earlier this year. I have a physical copy, but it is such a short one that I just listened to it in a day. It is so informative, but so digestible. If you want to know why people keep referencing historical events in the context of today and our current government system, this is a very informative and eye-opening read. I recommend. My next audiobook was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. Now listen to me. I've read Joan Didion before, physical books. I was like, what's wrong with me? Am I not smart enough for Joan Didion? Like, I've read 2 or 3 physical books of hers before and struggled so much that I was like, why do people like her writing? As an audiobook, like I was saying, like with nonfiction, I need an audiobook. This was incredible. I loved this. I had tried to read this one before and physically reading it, I just couldn't do it. But as an audiobook, this is heartbreaking. It's about the loss of her husband, sudden loss of her husband, and then the almost loss of her daughter, literally within the same month, I want to say. Like, it's so sudden. I will now be revisiting every Joan Didion book through audiobook because of what a wonderful experience this one was. 4.5 stars. I was literally crying. The next audiobook that I finished was House of Sky and Breath This is the second in the Crescent City series by Sarah J Maas. I finished reading the Crescent City series either in September or August. And like as soon as I finished the first book and went into reading the second one, I started the first one on audiobook because I wanted to stay in that universe. I definitely prefer physically reading this book versus listening to it. Reading it, I give it 5 stars. Elizabeth Evans is a fantastic narrator, but I appreciate the pacing of it so much more when I can read it on my own versus having to speed it up, slow it down on audiobook. And my final audiobook of the month, which was a recommendation from someone in my comments, was Disciples of White Jesus, The Radicalization of American Boyhood by Angela Denker. I thought this one was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it had a lot of really good and interesting examples of how religion has been used to push boys towards violence from a very young age into adulthood. But despite the examples, I didn't feel like there was a clear message coming from this book. I feel like there was definitely a clear idea in writing it, but how it was then presented to the reader, I didn't find I could grasp one solid thing. It was an easy audiobook though. I do recommend it if you're wanting to see some of those examples. Happy October, that's everything I read in September.